Avengers! Assemble.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, here back from the holiday recess for your episode for December 4th with the Apex legend, Jack Martin.
Excelsior, Christian. I feel like potentially this was the second longest break that Excelsior has been on. Of course, the year-plus long break that we took. But yeah, it's very good to be back talking about this game because there's quite a bit to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot that's been going on with this game in the very recent days, so the fact that we took a break off was kind of nice because nothing really happened with the game on that in-between outside of promo. But over the break, I could have thought of another name for you besides the Apex Legend, because I remember we had that conversation, and I did not. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. You know, maybe in the new year we can devise something.
Sure. That's a good goal to have.
I was thinking, like, I might clear up some space on the old PS5 with Apex, because I haven't touched it in probably a month.
Damn.
Yeah. And that's a top 10 game right there. I just don't play it.
Mm-hmm. You got that new newness with Halo Infinite.
Yeah, dude, Halo has taken over my life, and it's very exciting.
So, I know from our conversations over our break, Halo did take up a lot of your time, but was there any Marvel things that went on in general? How was your holiday?
It was a good holiday. I went down south for us, down to New Jersey.
Hey, I did too.
Oh, did you?
I went to Florida.
Oh, right. Yeah, you went to the big down south. Now, I gotta listen to your Galaxy's Edge impressions on Jedi Knights, because I believe this week you talked about that with Mike. Is that right?
That's true. Yes, that episode is up now.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to listen to that. But yeah, it was good. Went around to Philadelphia and Princeton while I was down there, so that was nice. Yeah, the most of the Marvel stuff that I was doing was this past week playing Spider-Man and also watching Hawkeye and also reading a little bit of the Mac Fraction run. I think I'm like 3 or maybe 4 issues in. I'm not like really, I'm going at my own pace really, but that's pretty much all the Marvel stuff that I've been up to.
Nice. And I think maybe over break or maybe before, but you beat Guardians, right?
Yes. Good call. It's been so long, man.
I know.
Yeah, I beat Guardians. Quick little, I guess, impressions of the game. I think it's really great. My biggest takeaway in terms of negatives is I think it goes on for a little too long. I forget my final time, but towards the end of the game, I was like, you know what? I feel like this could have wrapped up like a couple hours ago. And even at the very end, I won't spoil it, there's like an end, and then there's another end. And I'm like, we didn't need 2 endings in this game. I feel like we could have had one cohesive one. But yeah, it's really fun, and it has me excited for a potential sequel. I know Square Enix is it's kind of a little stingy in terms of its expectations, so we'll see if that happens. But man, I loved it. I think it's a Game of the Year contender this year, in my opinion. Will probably be surpassed by Halo, but this is probably my favorite game of the year so far.
Very nice. Yeah, I still have to finish it up because I put in a lot of work in it before I went on my vacation. And I was around, I think, 18 hours around that point. And I imagine I did the final part of like the midpoint of the game. Like I left that giant spaceship with the gold everywhere, you know, like that's where I left off. So I feel like I probably have another, at my rate, at least 10 hours to go with the game. But yeah, excited to get back to it because I really do enjoy it. I think it's a much better game than Avengers, despite our mutual love for Avengers. But yeah, I'm very glad that Guardians lived up to my expectations and exceeded them in a lot of ways. So
yeah, it's a really great game, and I would say for those listening who haven't picked it up, I think it's a really good holiday break game. Like if you just, it's really long, like kind of unexpectedly long, like for me at least. So if you want to get a game for like Christmas or something, or for the holiday season, and just sort of sink your teeth into it for a good 20, maybe 30 hours, depending on how long you take, it's a really good option.
For sure. And if some of you were lucky, you probably picked it up on Black Friday. I saw it at $25 in a few places, which is a steal.
Whoa, that is, especially for it coming out in October and like a month later, that is pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm. So maybe in the future we'll talk more about Guardians on a different episode, but we have a lot to get through today, Jack. We got Spider-Mania, honestly, because we're talking Homecoming, we're talking Spider-Man in the Avengers game. That's what it's called. This news of Tom Holland's Future of SpiderMan, and of course, Hawkeye. But the bright and shining star, as always, Fury's report. Let's talk the marketplace. You can get a Hawkeye nameplate right now. It's the logo for the show.
Yeah, there's actually two. There's the logo for the show, which is, I forget the exact, like, it's like a mission chain, and you have to do certain requirements. I forget exactly what they are. Most of mine were ticked off because you have to play as Clint and Kate. I think maybe you have to get them to level 50. I forget exactly what, but mine were already ticked off. So if you've played as them, they're probably already ticked off, or they're pretty close to being done. Another one is Pet Lucky, which I think is cute. And then another one is have both of them in your party in 2 or 3 war zones. So I just dropped it. I actually did this today. I just dropped in a couple drop zones and got those over quickly. And then,
nice.
Yeah, you get that. And then I think the free nameplate is like the bow is like sort of the iconography from the Matt Fraction run. So like the bullseyes and the arrows and stuff. I actually think that's better than the one you have to work for. The one you have to work for is just the lettering of the Hawkeye show, which is just a plain nameplate. But I kind of like the. I feel like for Kate or Clint, the free one they give away with the iconography is honestly a pretty decent nameplate to have up there.
Yeah, I agree. So honestly, looking at the marketplace, that was really the highlight. It's probably worth noting that over the last week or so, there was a sale that was going on. And the only reason I want to shout it out is because the MCU outfits finally got discounted, something that we thought was never going to happen.
Dude, I was seconds away from getting the Thor Endgame suit, which is really the Thor Infinity War suit. But I didn't do it.
Any particular reason? You just wanted to save some money?
Yeah, and I was like, do I really want this? I like the horns that he had, not the horns, the helmet that he has. I have like the green and yellow sort of Ren Fair looking skin with his helmet, which I really like. So I kind of opted to steer away from that. But if it's on sale again, which I'm sure it will be, maybe I'll get it at some point.
Yeah, I understand. You know, you gotta manage your funds, especially when you got a $20 katana to buy in Halo right now.
True. And I needed the credits for Spider-Man's challenge card, so I was being a little cautious.
Very good planning. I mean, let's just dive into it then, because there is new content in the game right now. First up, let's talk about the thing we haven't experienced yet, which is the raid. I know you're listening. You're like, these two have talked nonstop about wanting the goddamn raid in this game. They haven't played it yet? No, I haven't. Because honestly, I haven't felt the urge to play this game for a while.
No, I'm kind of with you. And it is, I was thinking that exact same thing. Like, we have really been wanting that multiplayer content in this game since launch. And this is it. And neither of us have really felt the immediate urge to jump into it. It's also coming out at a horrible time. Like, Halo is upon us, and that is where my time and your time is going to be spent for the next weeks / months / eternity. So it's not really a great time to jump in. Also, like, I think you can jump in at 150, but preferably you'd want to get to that 175 new level cap. And that means more grinding. Like, you need higher level gear to scrap down to get the gear that you already have and want to increase to actually boost that. So it's even more time to sink into it if you really want to go the extra step. So we will play it at some point. I don't know when that will be. From what I've seen, I guess what I haven't seen on the internet, I've seen like next to no impressions of the raid. So I think a lot of people are probably in the same boat as us. But it's exciting content. I hope it pans out okay.
Yeah, from what I've seen, for a completion time, again, this is very early and the raid will just get shorter as people play it more and figure out the best strategies. From a quick YouTube search, I see a world's first attempt, so that was like immediately when it went live. That stream archive is 5.5 hours.
Whoa.
A full run with timestamps, which looks to be the same account, is around 2:15. So kind of what you would expect out of a raid. Cooperatively going in fresh with no experience, no knowledge of strategies or what to expect. 5 hours I think is decent for like figuring it out. There's a lot of trial and error in that runtime, and then for a successful run, 2 hours, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's something that I look forward to experiencing personally.
Yeah, 2 hours sounds good. I think the 90-minute to 2 hour raid, for someone who hasn't really experienced too many raids, sounds pretty appealing to me. So yeah. Hopefully it ends up being like that.
Mm-hmm. So at some point in the near future, you and I will probably plan an evening, an afternoon perhaps, to run through this thing. Gotta assemble the Avengers, honestly, because I know one of my friends who has like a 150 cap would probably be down to run with us, because I've seen his cap and it's a monster. So
we should potentially petition Paul Tassi to join us, because he said in his Spider-Man I guess impressions video that he's gonna reach out to his Twitter for raid Avengers. So I feel like we're in a good spot to potentially join that crew.
Yeah, that'd be very fun, Paul, if you're listening, because this is the world's #1 Avengers podcast. Both fans of your work. I feel like we're somewhat competent. I don't got the Jarvis barrier on my Thor, but I got a Thor, so
I got the Jarvis barrier, so
yeah,
I got us covered.
Exactly. Well, why don't we talk about what we have played, Jack? Spider-Man. Where do we want to start with this? You want to start with his introduction? Because I was lost.
Sure, we can start there.
You load into the game. First up, I didn't even realize he was on the home screen. I was like, where's Spider-Man? Black Panther's still in the center. They always rotate. And then I didn't realize he was hanging on the left side.
Which, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Of course, yeah. Love they did that. But I should have known I'd have a problem when I didn't notice where Spider-Man was on the menu, because I load into the game, I have to go to the helicarrier, and then I go to the war
first
table.
Up,
yeah,
you have did you get the whole recap of the game?
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was weird.
Yeah, and I was like, man, I forget pretty much all of this. It's like you get a whole like campaign recap plus like little bits of the operations that have released since.
Yeah, it was just very surprising. I was like, this thing's going on. Like this is still going,
Yeah, it's like a solid 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I kind of forgot MODOK was in the game, if I'm being real.
Yep.
I forgot.
That's a missed opportunity for a villain sector, right?
Right? That was a cool boss fight. I forgot that like Monica was like playing him and he didn't realize what was happening. I forgot a lot about the campaign.
The name Tarleton.
Sure, yeah. But you get that, and then I think after that you get just spit back out into the game, right?
Yeah, for me at least, I was on the helicarrier, and you get like a little pop-up that says like, hey, Spider-Man is available, just go to his like mission chain and you can see what to do.
Yeah, so to get Spider-Man, I went to the war table, and then they gave me a message. It's like, looking for Spider-Man? Go to the command deck. I was like, where the hell is that? I imagine it's the main area. Then I went to the main area. I did laps, Jack. I'm like, where the fuck is Spider-Man? He's not here. Like, is my game bugged? And lo and behold, right across from Lucky It's just a big spider web in the window that you have to interact with. In the same part of the window where you could already interact and just look out, I was like, why would I examine that? Because it's just going to let me look at the helicarrier like I've done before. But
it's very odd. And like, I didn't have maybe as many problems. I think it was because I was automatically in the helicarrier. I don't think the game put me there. I think that's just where I spawn in usually. I just like, you know how like if you're like playing Skyrim or something, it's like, oh, I want to keep my character in Whiterun for whenever I come back, you know?
Yeah.
The helicarrier is just kind of my base of operations. So I just happened to be there, and then I went over by Lucky and I saw the spider web, and that was how I started. But I feel like it probably should be just a mission that you boot up, and then you even if it's silly to go on a Quinjet to start the mission, I feel like that'd be a lot easier if it was like something you could highlight on the war table and just automatically go to it.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm not an idiot, you know? But like I was lost. There wasn't even like a waypoint or a marker objective on there. You know, it was just like,
yeah,
do this thing that you would completely overlook. So
yeah, it's a bit odd.
It is. After that, though, you interact with it, and then you get 2 cutscenes. The first of which is comic book style, comic animated, you know, very low-key animation for Spider-Man hanging with the Avengers, talking about what it's been like being friends with them, hanging out in the helicarrier. This is our first taste of this new actor for Peter Parker's Spider-Man, the new direction for him. Is this animation? Off the jump, what do you think of this take on Peter?
I don't know if I'm completely sold on this Spider-Man yet. I mean, with such a high bar with Yuri Lowenthal as Spider-Man, it's really hard to really compare. It reminds me of new actors taking on the animated voice of Batman, where it's like, that's not Kevin Conroy, right? That it's the same thing. Like, Yuri Lowenthal is Spider-Man to me, so anything that's different is just like very much noticeable. Mm-hmm. I think this Spider-Man is much more fun. It's unfortunate we don't have much story content to really delve into his character. But I think this voice actor is a pretty good Spider-Man. Like I said, it's unfortunate we don't really get to see an arc with his character. But I think he makes a very fine Spider-Man.
Yeah, I like it so far, because, like you said, while there's not really story missions, we do get this animation, then a following cutscene that's like a let's start where it all began, and then it shows his actual introduction to the group in a normal style cutscene. That, along with the quips and some of the banter he's had during fights, like he's selling Spider-Man to me. He definitely sounds younger, maybe, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, because Yuri Lowenthal does sound like a mid-20s, late-20s Spider-Man. I think he has not the direction of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but like maybe one of the Spider-Mans from a cartoon, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Not like a lesser than Spider-Man, but it doesn't sound like this would be like the main Spider-Man if they were like doing like a 5 or like a 10 seasons, I don't know, Spider-Man show. This wouldn't be the actor they go with, I think, but I think for what this is, I think he does a good job.
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to the comic style animation, though, what do you think of that as a means to tell a story or an introduction in this game after everything we've seen so far? Because personally, it always reminds me of Infamous 1, and I thought that was an incredible choice in Infamous 1. And you can easily do it in an underwhelming way, but I thought this was pretty good, you know, for not getting a normal cutscene that we got with the campaigns. And I thought it was a fun way to introduce Spider-Man. even though I know they probably did this because it's not in the budget to make an entire chain of cutscenes for one character that's on one platform.
No, definitely. And I really like your comparison to Infamous. I didn't really think of that when I was playing this. But per your point, like a few weeks ago, it kind of seems like this could be the sort of benchmark of introducing characters that they don't want to do a full operation with. Like, I think I said a few weeks ago, like, if they want to introduce Bucky, I don't know if they're going to have a whole operation for him as a character. Like, I don't... They could, of course, but I feel like he could be a character that they just sort of drop in, or maybe like War Machine, characters who are basically like echoes of the other characters we have. Mm-hmm. I feel like if they did something like this, where it was a hero event and like a short comic book cutscene to catch us up to where they've been and how they joined, I feel like that's fine, and save maybe the operations for some of the bigger characters.
Sure, yeah, and sort of out of order, but it doesn't matter. My stark realities question was, going into next year, do you think that Spider-Man is that new benchmark? And it sounds like yes, with the asterisk of, unless it's somebody who would bring with them a major story thing, like whenever we get Captain Marvel, because she's absolutely going to be a character in this game based off of Kamala, the Kree, like all of that stuff. I imagine Carol would bring a War for Wakanda-sized expansion. But in the meantime, I guess, even characters on the level of like Kate or Clint, do you think you could see them come to the game and continue on with this comic book style thing with a mission quest line that's sort of in line with other events where it's destroy this like X number of exos, collect this resource, do these takedowns, spliced in with there's a new NPC in the social area, go to them in between these and get a little info.
I think it would make more sense to do these for characters that wouldn't necessarily move the story along. Sure. Like Kate and Clint had their operations because they were essentially like story DLCs that just included a new character. Mm-hmm. But like for characters that wouldn't really, like Spider-Man doesn't move the story along. Really, he has his own like kind of story throughout the hero event. But for someone who is coming in and is just, I think the way other like people online have described it was Spider-Man was like an addition to like a hero shooter, like Fuse coming into Apex Legends or something like that. You could totally do that and just have like a short little animated thing like this to explain like why they're here. But yeah, I feel like that's entirely possible to do this going forward. I'll expect like future operations for bigger characters, but for the smaller characters that don't really need to progress the story, I could see this happening.
I guess where my head's at is that I imagine maybe them pivoting to maybe either to get them at a rate that they initially planned on getting characters out, transitioning to characters come into the game this way, and then maybe the story stuff that we got out of like Clint or Kate would just be saved for whenever the big expansion is, just so they can get somewhat of a consistent turnaround with some of these things. And maybe like it's a lot of big question marks right now because we don't know what their plan is moving forward. But in a world where other things like you compared Apex just kind of drop a character with a cutscene, like a CG trailer or something. Yeah, if this was what we got moving forward, I don't think I'd mind, as long as we did get a larger expansion, maybe once a year, or a raid with some cutscenes in it, or some sort of seasonal story arc, like the Cosmic Cube. Like, I think there's a world where they can pivot to mimicking other games and maybe scaling back on the AAA, high budget, high fidelity cutscenes for every single character and story arc we have to implement. And it would probably just be better for everybody involved. Like, it's not going to be as pretty, but at the end of the day, we got a really fun to play character for the most part. And if we can get more of those faster, I would sacrifice the like Clinton Kate sized operations every 4 months, you know.
Yeah, the thing with this though, now that I'm thinking more about it, I have a feeling that Spider-Man, they never planned to have an operation for Spider-Man. It was always going to be like this. And it seems like they sort of planned on having operations for every other character, like Clint and Kate. So if they wanted to scrap that, it seems like they'd have to scrap like the story involved with that, which would progress the overall plotline of this game. So what does that mean for development? It's really hard to sort of anticipate what they're doing in terms of hero events versus operations, because I feel like if they wanted to scrap the operations storylines, I feel like that's a lot of work. So it's like what you said, it's kind of unclear what their plans are going forward. I think we'll have a better sense if we get that roadmap for 2022 in the next couple of months to see what's happening throughout the next year.
Sure. Well, what do you actually think of Spider-Man as a character? Is he continuing the trend of every other character in this game and feeling fun to play? I gave a little hint of what I thought, but let me know. You just does it live up to what you expected out of this take on Spider-Man gameplay wise? How are you enjoying Spidey?
I feel like for this podcast, Christian, we either have very positive things to say or very negative things to say. And I have very positive things to say about Spider-Man because I love the way he plays. And I am very surprised that I'm saying this because I had very low expectations going into this. Like everyone, I think we were all kind of going in with the comparisons in our mind to Insomniac Spider-Man. And honestly, I feel like I was actually playing Spider-Man PS4 recently. It is really a close 1-to-1 comparison in terms of like the button mapping and like
that was my biggest surprise.
Like the gameplays and controls, like square is punch, holding it square down will punch someone in the air, just like Insomniac. Triangle will zip you to an enemy, and it's pretty much like the same controls. It's just Spider-Man in this game is limited to the context and like I guess like barriers and restrictions of Marvel's Avengers and the gameplay with that.
Different combos.
So, yeah, exactly. Like they obviously had to fit Spider-Man and how he feels into like the different enemy types and just the layout of the gameplay with this game. But with that said, I feel like they did a really good job in terms of making him feel quick and zippy and also powerful in a lot of ways. Like he can do takedowns a lot more quickly than other heroes can if you fill up the intrinsic meter, which I think is great. So he's always doing takedowns and he's always doing his like ultimate abilities. And like very quickly, he's become one of my favorite heroes in the lineup, and he's one of my favorite, if not favorite, melee characters. And I'm very surprised to be saying that.
Yeah, it's very nice. He feels great. He doesn't feel like Black Widow. He doesn't feel like Black Panther even. He feels like Spider-Man, which I think was a worry people had. And obviously, I don't think it feels as great as Insomniac's.
No.
But the way I did a TikTok about this earlier today, I think the best way for me to describe how I feel about it is it feels a bit more arcadey than Insomniac's Spider-Man, in that it reminds me of kind of a progression of like some of the PS1 and PS2 Spider-Mans, in that like, yeah, squares punch, triangles webbing. It's kind of been that way, at least on the PlayStation side, for many Spider-Man games. And he is restricted to a glass ceiling in the world, you know? Like he was in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 1 game, the Neversoft game, Ultimate Alliance, Friend or Foe, all of those back in the day. So I think he feels good. The only thing that I feel like is not fun or good is wall climbing is terrible.
Oh, I think you got to avoid it at all costs.
I just don't understand. I don't know how to jump off the damn wall, dude. I like I hit X to jump off the wall and he like jumps onto the wall again instead. I don't understand it.
It's honestly like a magnet. If you're on there, it's really
It's a
hard
good
to
luck
get
getting
off.
off, yeah.
Yeah, it's climbing in this is like we've been saying, he's kind of restricted to the confines of this game. So like these environments aren't good to swing around in or climb around in. So they kind of just had to do their best, and it's very unfortunate that Spider-Man doesn't feel like Spider-Man in a city really in this.
Yeah, but you are able to swing on nothing, which I think was the right call. You know, like if you go to Russia, you can swing in the open field.
Yeah.
I think that was necessary.
No, absolutely.
There's been times where I think the web swinging I'm enjoying, but it just feels a little spotty to me in that, like, holding it down just continuously feels like I'm moving way too slow. So then the way I do it in Insomniac Spider-Man is R2, do a swing, release. When I'm ready, R2 again, and just continue that cycle. And here, I find myself enjoying the movement better when I replicate that, but it's still like very specific to get myself moving as Spidey at a speed that feels like it's a benefit, where the fact that it's spotty, sometimes I'm like, I should just be running because I'd feel like I'm going faster, you know?
I have a huge pro tip for you,
Okay.
and for anyone listening. So I was doing the same for a while out of muscle memory with Insomniac Spider-Man, where I would hit the right trigger, release the right trigger, hit it again. And in that, I was swinging around before we recorded, and it feels leagues better than this, as expected. But I was doing that with this incarnation of Spider-Man, and it, like what you're saying, it was just really slow. So what I've been doing, and I've noticed like a dramatic speed increase, is hit the right trigger and then hit the jump button, because it'll like propel you in the air, and then hit the right trigger again to fire another web. And that will go a lot quicker than just right trigger, release, right trigger, and like keep swinging. It's a lot quicker. It's still not good in my opinion. You don't really have a sense of momentum. You're just kind of, it feels much more static than like the old Spider-Man games or the new Insomniac Spider-Man games. But I feel like it's one of the better ways of getting around in this game, like in the context of the way heroes can maneuver around the environments.
Yeah.
Like the flying characters are the best, obviously, and then you have Captain America and like Black Widow and Ms. Marvel and like Black Panther, who are unfortunately like not fun to move around the environments with. But I think Spider-Man is probably like third in line of being fun enough to get around.
Yeah, I'll try doing that in other maps because I've used that method, because that's how you like get your little boost in Insomniac Spider-Man, and I think Spider-Man 3 back in the day you could do that also for like the boost at the bottom of your swing. I've tried that a little bit in the city, and I think that's where I found myself running into like, it feels spotty. I shouldn't even be trying to make this feel better, but I bet in an outdoor arena or like the woods or the Pacific Northwest, it might feel a little better to do the boost.
Yeah. Something else in terms of like navigating the environments, similar to the new Spider-Man games, you can hit X on like a lamppost or like a building top to zip over there. And the camera, when you do that, goes completely wild, and like it recenters itself. Like you can't even move it for a couple seconds. I have a feeling like that's something that could be patched, because that doesn't seem like a major thing. But right now, I try to avoid that at all costs, because you just get so discombobulated, and it's really not fun to do.
Yeah, and I think I know we're talking a lot about negativity, but I am really, really enjoying the character. I think the major thing is that it feels so much how you think it should feel in so many ways, that the ways that it doesn't, it stands out more, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Like the X to grapple onto like a ledge, you can do that in Insomniacs if you do the L2R2, right? On a certain point, and then you can launch yourself off of it. But when I try to hit X again after getting onto a lamppost or a ledge, I do nothing. I'm still locked in there until I do like the forward step thing to move on from where I was going.
Right.
But like you said before, the combos, the sort of natural expectation of do the uppercut and then jump and then hold triangle, you'll do the web swing kick, like that all feels amazing. So as a melee character, as a ranged character, all great. I think the only downside, like we've been talking about, is traversal, really.
Yeah, I would say for 80 to 85% of the gameplay you're going to experience with Spider-Man, it's fantastic. Like, it's really, I'm surprised I'm saying this, it's really fun to play as Spider-Man. In like the confines of this game, obviously there are better Spider-Man games, but as a hero in Marvel's Avengers, Spider-Man is like one of the better ones, in my opinion. Yeah. He feels very different than a lot of the characters do in this game. Like, he's very quick, but at the same time, he has like a lot of abilities to like I said earlier, do takedowns and like just keep getting, like, I attach takedown kills to, well, not kills, I attach takedowns to the heroic orbs, so I'm just constantly using my ultimates and just getting those back. So that's, it honestly kind of reminds me of Captain America in a way. So that's really fun, but he's very light on his feet. You can zip people up to the sky if you're in midair, and then you can juggle, which I'm surprised about. Like, I'm getting higher up in the hero levels, and usually when you do that, you can't do all the fun moves you could have in the earlier levels, but I'm still juggling people in the air. I'm still like zipping around and having a lot of freedom to kind of mess with the enemies. So far, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, he feels very light. You know, I think some of the other Avengers characters, I think they all feel fun to play with the exception of Hulk. But even the ones I love, I feel like they feel very hefty at times. Like Thor, I love Thor, but he feels not clunky, but he feels like Thor should feel, you know? But Captain America feels that way too. Yeah. Spider-Man feels very, very light, which I enjoy. And the ranged attack he has for just, let's say, just like the pistol style web shoot is fine. You have to be very specific with it, but I love the second one you can get, which is like the dual web shotgun blast sort of thing that covers a wider range. That one's really nice because the main thing you're going to want to be doing with Spider-Man is you always want to be webbing up enemies, be it your abilities or your ranged attacks, because that's how you're able to get an instant takedown. So a webbed up enemy, if you have your intrinsic up, you'll be able to take them down even if they're not stunned enough to take them down, which is very, very good. I don't know if your team would be able to take advantage of that either. I imagine they would be able to in like a multiplayer raid scenario, because Spider-Man feels like a crowd control character where
that's a good question.
You know, like if you're playing Iron Man and I'm Spidey, the dynamic duo of the MCU,
True.
If I webbed up a group of enemies and they're all like in the straitjacket going around, can't move, could Iron Man just go up and do a takedown there? Because I'd imagine,
like, my impression was he can only do the takedowns once his intrinsic meter is fully up. Like, I was webbing up enemies, but I couldn't take them down until you basically punch enemies to get your intrinsic meter up. And like, I would have my intrinsic meter would be 0, and I'd have enemies that were webbed up, and I couldn't take them down until I got the intrinsic up. So I don't think other heroes would be able to take them down.
Gotcha. Well, aside from that, it does feel really good to web them up. You know, I feel like I'm using the webbing in this game more than I did, honestly, in the Insomniac games, where there it kind of just feels like a whip in a way with what you can do with it. But here it's like, no, you gotta stun people, keep them still. I know we have the web bomb in the other games, but here that's like your first step to every combat encounter, which I think is fun.
No, definitely. And I've been using the third option a lot, which is like the sort of trip mine.
Yeah.
and like I'll either shoot it at the ground or shoot it at an enemy, and I'll like zip people together and instantly web them up. And I'm honestly very surprised that once you get to the tougher enemies like Adaptoids and Exos, you can web up literally every enemy except for like villains, which I tried. Like the villain sectors villains. But yeah, you can web up pretty much every enemy, and that will just completely freeze them for a few seconds, which is awesome. Like that is such a great addition to like the sort of meta of this game. And I feel like with most characters, you can't really freeze them in place for a significant amount of time, and that is completely changed with Spider-Man. So I think that's great.
What do you think of the skins and the challenge card? Because you mentioned you bought the challenge card. I did as well. But what do you think of the offerings we have at launch?
I think the skins are really good. There's some great standout ones, and I'm pretty impressed that they were able to differentiate themselves from Insomniac's Spider-Man skin offerings. Like there's definitely some overlap. Like notably for me at least, the black Spider-Man suit with like the green highlights. That's in this game. I forget the name of it. Like the Mark 1 is in this and things like that. But yeah, there's some great looking suits. The challenge card is kind of similar to any other challenge card. There's nothing in there that is gonna blow your mind. There's some cool things. I really like the I actually really like the like reporter Spider-Man outfit where he's like in a vest and like shirt and tie. Same. And he just has his mask on. That's so fun. I think that's a cool one. So yeah, so far I really like the skins. There's nothing that I'm sort of itching to buy yet, but I have a feeling in a few weeks there's probably going to be some cool drops.
Hopefully, yeah. You know, we got several generations of Spider-Man hopefully in the spotlight very soon. So it would make a whole lot of sense for a game such as this to have some synergy behind it, but it's made sense a lot of times in the past. It's only capitalized on that a few times. Hopefully they planned for this, you know?
I would be surprised if they didn't. Like they kind of have to. Like this came out in December, or I guess late November. And No Way Home's coming out. There's like 1,000 suits in that movie. Gotta have at least one.
For sure. Any last thoughts on Spider-Man in the game before we move on to other ongoings in the Marvel Universe?
Yeah. So I'm mostly positive on this. I think he will be in the rotation. I'm gonna get him to 150. The thing I really dislike about something else I dislike about this is the amount of time to get through his mission chain. I'm like on objective 13 and it looks like I'm barely a quarter of the way through.
Oh my, I'm on 6, dude.
Yeah, it's actually like it's pretty awful. The objectives are things from like defeat enemies when you're in the air or like web up enemies really quickly, and things like that, and it can feel like a slog to get through, especially with the progress bar being very slow. I'm interested to see how many missions you actually, or objectives you actually have to do to complete the mission chain, and I have a feeling that it is going to be a very low completion rate. I don't think we'll see the stats on that, but you have to do that to get his iconic suit in this, which looks amazing. Like It's the Marvel's Avengers own crafted Spider-Man suit, and it's going to take hours to do that. Like I've probably put like 2 to maybe 4 hours into playing Spider-Man, and I'm barely through the mission chain. So that's something I don't like.
Yeah, that is a good point to bring up, because I understand why it's that long, since there's no actual objective-based, or there's objectives, but there's no quest line for an actual operation. That's what I meant. Right. So maybe they felt they had to make up for that by giving you a lot of things to do as Spider-Man, which I appreciate, but I feel like we could have scaled back a lot, because a lot of these feel like the same objective at times. You know, it's like, use this attack to take people out, do this thing, find these enemies. It's like the typical thing you do for the Tachyon Rift event, the Red Room, or not Red Room, because that was just in the Red Room. But you know what I mean, like normal event things. What you're doing to do the Hawkeye nameplate, same sort of mindset here, you know?
Yeah, it's a glacially slow process, so if they do the event, the hero event stuff going forward, I hope it's a lot more expedited than this.
Yeah, I'm completely cool with that. Even if the hero events, like we discussed as an option earlier, if those are the primary way we get story, small character-based content, feel free to scale it back. You don't need to give me a 25-part mission chain or whatever. Like, 10 is good, you know, especially if every objective is just using an ability a number of times or collecting a resource. So,
oh, and you also unlock like voice messages and like emails, and I will never read those or listen to those because I haven't done that with this game so far, and I don't plan on doing that anytime soon.
So I read the first one, and I haven't. I think my next objective is I have to go to the anthill and talk to Liz. Mm-hmm. The first thing I read the first text because it was a text exchange between the two of them, and I guess like Peter went through her because she was working for AIM, and he used her to get info on AIM, and then they found out about it, and then Liz got really mad at him, and it was just a text exchange about those two things. So,
gotcha.
That's all I read. I imagine she'll probably say a similar thing when I talk to her, but yeah, overall, Spidey's good. I'm sorry, Xbox fans.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But if you are a PlayStation player and you want to give them a go, it's free. It's still like one of the surprising things about this game. Like all the content is free, which is kind of crazy to think about. So definitely give him a go. He's very fun to play.
In your time back in the game, have you noticed any of the quality of life, UI, gear changes in your early hours? Because I think the updates to the gear system, we talked about this before, we're just seeing them in practice now. Welcome. I think good change, being able to upgrade through resources, anything that's above level 100 to the cap. Good move. I don't know if you could do this before, but through the main menu you can fully equip your best gear again. I think for some reason I remember that being on each individual piece sub-menu instead of the main overall character menu, but you can do that. Maybe you could before, but...
Yeah, I thought you could before.
Okay.
Something I noticed, I know this wasn't recommended, but I would do it anyways to try to expedite the process of grinding, but once I get to like the later levels, like 100, I would like start like using my resources, because I had so many, into just like getting my 100s to 110. So then I would get 110 drops and get those to 120, you know, instead of just naturally stumbling upon different gear. I would just sort of try and get that number up as high as I can, as fast as I can. I noticed you can't upgrade. I'm in like the power level 57, 59. You can't upgrade anything yet. Like I can't upgrade any of my gear slots. I think probably until 100. That's not a big thing, and that's only an issue from like level 1 to 100. But I think the gear process, for me at least, is a little slower.
Sure, yeah. I feel like before, was it also you could only upgrade it from 100 on, or could you upgrade it if it was like a 30 something before?
I think it was much lower, because I'd be upgrading things like maybe in like the 70s or 80s to like just keep that number moving. But yeah, I think that has changed at least. Maybe I'll check back next week, but I think that has changed. Not that big of an issue.
They also messed with the resources, so I don't even know how many resources there were before. I feel like there were like
it's like
8.
5. It was a lot.
It's been consolidated now to just polychoron and filaments, I think.
It's fragments.
Yes.
And polychoron's the stuff you can upgrade your, like, what's it called?
Your artifacts?
Yeah, you can upgrade your artifacts with polychoron, and fragments are used to upgrade gear, and then you also have the upgrade modules which you have to use, I think, after 130 now.
Okay.
So yeah, that's all. And you still have like DNA keys to unlock DNA chests, but that's really it. If you're upgrading gear, you only have to worry about upgrade modules and fragments. Yes. So like all of your old like resources, I'm pretty sure that's all just been converted into fragments now.
Yeah, which is nice. You know, you get a little bit of a boost when you log back in with the new changes. So
right, yeah.
Overall, solid changes. I haven't been playing it regularly since War for Wakanda, so it's nice to be back in and have a new thing to experience with a new character I like, with a goal to get towards being the raid. Because now, liking Spider-Man so much, I would like him to be raid ready by the time we do it, so I could just run Spider-Man in there, because I think that'd be fun. So
that would be fun. So we'll see. But it mostly positive, I'd say, from the both of us.
Agreed. Well, Jack, meanwhile, there's a few things going on in the Marvel universe. First up, let's talk about potentially bad news, but Benedict Cumberbatch swears it's not. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is having extensive reshoots. What do you make of this?
I guess that makes sense of why this movie's been pushed back very far. Is it May now, or
I think it's May. I think it's May.
Yeah, so I guess that makes sense. I honestly never really know what to make of reshoots. Sometimes it is kind of the natural process of filmmaking. Like, reshoots just happen pretty much for every movie.
Yeah.
But like what you said, these are like very big reshoots, and so much so that the movie's been pushed back. I don't think they announced that was the reason why it was pushed back, but kind of get the sense that it played into it. The whole Marvel lineup was pushed back, so who knows? But yeah, I guess we won't really know what this means for the movie until we actually see it and we hear some more stories about it. But it's worth noting for sure.
Yeah, and you know, when it comes to the MCU, the way they prep their movies is that the set pieces are done multiple years ahead of time. So I don't imagine like the memorable moments that we'll have for Multiverse of Madness are being altered significantly, but when it comes to the story or maybe just the character interactions, that's probably what's getting the updated treatment. And most of these are shot on a soundstage at this point anyway, to the point where rescheduling it, I'm not really worried about it, even if it is extensive, just because I don't know what the change would be, unless it's like, let's just hypothetically say the story's changing pretty significantly in the angle of like motivations. If they just have to reshoot the interactions between the main characters again, like I don't know how much of that is on set being a problem Frankensteining, you know, because they shot it originally for the most part on a soundstage and green screens in a normal shooting schedule. So like, I don't know if I'm worried, because like you said, this is just something that happens.
Yeah. It's, I don't even know if we'll like end up knowing the full story of like what this movie was even supposed to be. So we just know that there are going to be reshoots, and we don't. I don't know if there's going to be a culmination to this story aside from the movie coming out. Like, what was the original intent of this movie and things like that. I don't know if we'll ever get the answer to that, because sometimes we just don't. Maybe years from now we will. But yeah, it's hard to really even talk about a topic like this, because we don't know what the intentions were, and we don't know what the revisions are now until the movie comes out. So,
is this Sam Raimi's Nightmare Returns? This is a studio interference and guidance for his film again after Spider-Man 3?
I would sincerely hope not, for his sake, because I'm sure that would give him a massive headache. So I hope not. It could just be a, I don't even know. It could be, there's like so many different, this could be like an MCU thing. This could just be a Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness thing. I really don't know the extent of this. I don't think anyone really does, so it's like, hard to say.
Yeah, I think it's weird because when it comes to the MCU, like you mentioned, it could be an MCU reason where like if there was a world where Tom Holland was gone, maybe they'd have to change an element of the plot here. If they're fast tracking the X-Men and they need to introduce the X-Men somehow in this movie, maybe that's why it's being reshot. You know, it's just there's so many questions of what this could be about that I don't think there's necessarily a reason to worry because there's so much that's unknown and there's so many factors that could play here where it wouldn't for, let's say, a Star Wars movie that's getting reshoots very, very close to when it should have came out, you know? So, up in the air.
Yeah, movies get reshoots all the time. We really don't know what this could mean until the movie comes out.
Well, there's another movie that's got a ways to go before it arrives in theaters near you. Mm-hmm. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Is it going to get reshoots? I don't know, but they got a long way to go. Have you seen the set gift?
No. Can you describe what this is?
So it's a t-shirt. I was gonna
Does it have the horrible font?
No. I was gonna put the picture in the doc, but I chose not to in case you were averse to potential teaser spoilers. It is a t-shirt with Scott's Ant-Man helmet on it, and the right side of the helmet, like right nose, right eye, right jaw, shattered like Darth Vader's helmet in Empire Strikes Back in the forest. Completely shattered.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Empty inside. And on the right side, there's a reflection of Big Blue Boy, Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah, I'm seeing that right now. That's interesting. This seems like a very dark tone from this image, and I wouldn't expect that from Ant-Man.
I mean, this is the third Ant-Man movie. Peyton Reed has been here the whole way. I wonder if this is Scott Lang's final ride. Do you think that's a possibility?
Is this the Cars 3 to the Ant-Man trilogy?
I never saw Cars 3. I'm sorry.
I didn't either. Cars sucks. But the trailer was very like dark in tone.
Yeah.
But dude, I really hope not because
right?
I feel like Paul Rudd's aura and like his popularity, he was just named Sexiest Man Alive. I feel like he has a fairly decently long future ahead of him in the MCU. Like, I don't know if Marvel really wants to give up on Paul Rudd just yet. So I don't know if this is his last project. I'm certainly hoping not. But it seems like this is going to be, at least from this image, like, seems kind of dark. Like, you reserve the hero's mask being destroyed for like a very, important moment in that character's existence, and they're doing that here. So, definitely going to be a darker movie.
Was this imagery used in the Age of Ultron marketing? I feel like I remember Cap's shield being shattered in the Age of Ultron marketing.
I don't remember.
Okay. The Ragnarok trailer, Mjolnir got blown up.
Right, yeah.
So, but I hear you. I'm with you. I think this movie could be dark, especially we know post-Loki how serious of a threat Kang is going to be.
True.
Interesting choice when it was announced that Kang was going to be in, maybe next to Guardians, the most consistently comedic franchise in the MCU, being Ant-Man.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
So maybe, who knows, maybe this is Hank. Maybe that's Hank's helmet. Maybe Michael Douglas is done.
That seems more likely.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's probably it. So
I would hope so. I mean, I like Michael Douglas in these movies, but
me too, yeah. But
there comes a time.
For sure. And
your time's up, Mike.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with you. I think Paul Rudd, even if he doesn't have Ant-Man movies to lead anymore, I'd still like him to be around in other projects, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Speaking of other projects, kind of a big drop before we went, or after we went on break. Disney Plus Day happened. We got some teasers of multiple Marvel projects, including Echo, She-Hulk, Moon Knight, and there was one other show that aren't the other two that I wrote in the doc that I'm pretty sure got a teaser, and I can't remember what it was.
I don't remember. I feel like these are all the ones I got. Echo, I don't think got a teaser. I think Moon Knight definitely did, and She-Hulk definitely did. Mm-hmm. And then they talked about the Agatha show.
That's what I was thinking of. Yes, because the Agatha show, I believe, prior to this was just a rumor, but a trade reported on it, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so out of the live action shows, anything stand out to you? The Moon Knight thing, I wish they showed more than what they did, because that was kind of just what leaked, I think, a while back. But what do you think?
Yeah, it's Moon Knight for me, for sure. I mean, Oscar Isaac, I mean, how much more do we need to say?
Yeah.
I really liked that. It was very quick, but I liked the sort of tone setting of his character, and seems like I think his character has a personality disorder. Where, like,
believe he has schizophrenia in the comics.
Okay. And I feel like he's like split almost. Like, you ever see that movie?
Yes.
I didn't see it, but I know the premise. And it seems like he is kind of similar to that character. So that'll be really interesting to see, like, how do you deal with a hero that's like that? So, and to have Oscar Isaac behind that is going to be very engrossing. So, yeah, that's the one I'm particularly excited about.
Yeah, out of the live action shows, Moon Knight, since like that initial batch got announced, I think was one of the ones I was most interested in, especially that Oscar Isaac is tied to it, because like he's a great actor. I love him. He's great in anything I've seen him in. Solid Snake in the flesh. So I'm down to see him enter the MCU in Moon Knight. It kind of gives me like shades of, I know this is a high comparison, but at least in the way it's presented, Netflix's Daredevil.
Ooh, yeah, I could see that.
So, I mean, that's a tone that we've been missing for a while. I'd like to see it back, and I think Moon Knight would be a good way to carry on that torch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Despite, Echo actually being a Daredevil character, but...
That's the thing, like, we'll talk about her when we get to our Hawkeye discussion, but, like, she's almost, like, the opposite side of the coin of Daredevil in terms of, like, using her disability as, like, a power in a way. Like, her senses are enhanced because of her deafness, so... yeah, Echo could be somewhat similar to Daredevil as well.
I think the announcements from that day that broke the internet, however, the major one is X-Men 97, the revival and return of the 90s X-Men animated series.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of nailed this one. Like, we were talking about the X-Men rumor, and we were talking about, like, is this going to be, like, a canon thing? It was supposed to be like an X-Men cartoon, and then I think we were like, well, what if they just did like the old X-Men cartoon and it's just not canon? They just reboot it, and that's what they ended up doing, and that's cool. I haven't seen any of it, but I know people love this show, especially with like all the memes you see of like Wolverine holding up that portrait. So yeah, it's cool. Maybe I'll jump back into the old X-Men cartoon.
I think that's how they announced it on Twitter. Also, I think they used that meme template,
yes,
which is fantastic.
Yep.
But yeah, I've always loved the X-Men, but it's been because it was one of the first superhero movies I saw next to Spider-Man. So like those older X-Men movies, the Hugh Jackmans, I love, which got me into other X-Men media. Like, I think Wolverine and the X-Men was the show that we had when we were younger. I think that was like a Disney XD show or something.
It could have been. I don't think I watched it.
Or maybe X-Men Evolution. It was one of those two. But yeah, I've never seen the 90s X-Men show. Love the 90s Spider-Man. So yeah, maybe I'll check out some of this. I do love the X-Men, and this seems to be the point of reference for a lot of people when it comes to that team. So probably worth checking out.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, I kind of hope a lot of... not a lot, but I hope more Marvel Studios productions are like this, where it's like, hey, we have a bunch of Marvel characters, and it seems like this isn't in the MCU. Like, we have a bunch of Marvel characters, and we're just gonna kind of make a cool show about them, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the MCU. So I kind of hope they do more stuff like that. Like, we don't need everything connecting in the MCU. Like, we can just have characters kind of mess around, and that'd be fun.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see more characters fleshed out this way. I'd love to see other old shows be revived as well. I think there's a opportunity there to capitalize on nostalgia the way that Disney Plus would probably benefit from in a lot of ways. So I bet this will be very successful. I also bet that this is not the first revival they'll do.
No, I think you're probably right. I feel like they have a lot to choose from the well. So
yeah, did you ever watch Spectacular Spider-Man?
No, that wasn't the 90s Spider-Man, right?
No, that was like middle school. I think that was like I forget what network it was on, but it was like middle school. It had a banging theme song for Spidey.
No, I don't think I watched that one.
Okay. That one is a huge fan favorite. I don't know who owns the rights to that, but if they announced that was coming back, I think the internet would melt.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
The other animated show that was announced is MCU canon. And it's a show for the people who are mad that we didn't see Uncle Ben get shot again. Spider-Man freshman year. It is, like it sounds, the first year of Tom Holland's Spider-Man being Spider-Man in the MCU. Thoughts?
Very cool. They're limiting themselves for this show. Like, it literally cannot be a 5-season show. Like, that's quite impossible. So It seems like this is going to be a season or two. I guess we haven't seen like multiple season MCU shows yet, so think about this as a 1-season show, maybe 2 or 3. But I think that's a really cool idea of going back to, we don't need to see, and we didn't need to see Spider-Man. We'll talk about this soon. Like, we didn't need that origin story because we already got it like 1,000 times before, and everyone knows it on planet Earth. So we didn't need that, but it is cool to see them use this venue of an animated TV show and retell that. I think that is a really good way of going back to this. Like, we don't need a prequel movie or whatever. So it's fun that they're gonna have some like creative liberties to sort of retell that or tell that story and do it in this fashion. So I think that's fun.
Yeah, and I imagine that it could probably cover a lot of ground, even if it is just, dedicated to this specific era of his life. I could maybe see them even get 2 seasons out of that first year, depending on how they plan it out, or maybe it's just a 16-episode show. But like, you have the intro to Peter, the actual bite, learning the powers, Uncle Ben. You have a lot of ground you can cover, and then like the following first year before he meets Tony Stark. So like, I think it's an interesting concept, and I'm definitely gonna watch this, but I wonder if this is meant to be a gap bridging Spidey series between the end of this Home trilogy with No Way Home and the beginning of Tom Holland's next Spider-Man film, because he's staying around, Jack. Isn't that good news?
It's fantastic news, and it's honestly very surprising in a way, given his recent comments of saying, if I'm Spider-Man when I'm 30, like, that's a problem. So it kind of seemed like he was very hesitant about returning as Spider-Man after this trilogy, but yeah, Amy Pascal confirmed, like, hey, yeah, we're doing another trilogy. Like, this is what we're doing right now is 3 movies, and we're moving on to the next 3, and Tom Holland's coming with us. So yeah, that's quite excellent, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, I was a little bit of a grain of salt when those comments came out, because, we hear people say this all the time. I always go back to when Benedict Cumberbatch was like, I'm not playing Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness.
Right.
But I think that could have been a number of things. Either maybe he's being genuine and he still wants to be out by the time he's 30. That could still be a fact. If we continue that every 2 years we get a Spidey movie, like, he could still retire by then. He might have just been straight up lying. He might have been using it as marketing tactics for his next contract. Don't know. But yeah, I'm glad he's sticking around. And we'll get into Homecoming in just a bit, but like, I hear why people don't like his take on Spider-Man or the MCU Spider-Man, but MCU has always been about the long game, and I think a new trilogy gives us that opportunity to get him in that 8 years in Spider-Man PS4, the Tobey Maguire struggling Spider-Man that people always expect to see. It's just we never had him in high school before, so we took that opportunity in the MCU when we had it, and now this is the next step.
Yeah, and we've talked about the, I guess, rumor of like the 3 trilogies that they wanted to do of high school Peter, college Peter, and then out of college Peter. I think that is probably unrealistic for a lot of reasons, namely because that's at least 9 movies that Tom Holland has to do as Spider-Man, plus the other ones that he's in, like the Avengers movies. So yeah, I have a feeling they're not going to do that. But if we get another trilogy out of Tom Holland, plus the ancillary Avengers movies that he's in, or any other team-up movies that he's in, that will be the longest anyone has played Spider-Man in a live-action role. And when we see him go, it's going to be very emotional, I think. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this trilogy. I hope they play it more serious. Obviously, still have the quips and jokes that make Spider-Man Spider-Man, but been missing out on the weight of Spider-Man movies, and I think with different direction going forward, I think it'll be a good change for Spider-Man back to the more, I guess, emotional aspects of the character.
Yeah, and I think I remember like playing Spider-Man PS4 for the first time, and I was like, I could see a world where one day this is who he becomes, because PS4 Spider-Man is relying on gadgets to it, like more so than a lot of other takes on the character, and just the way that character feels like there's weight with Yuri Lowenthal's performance and the story they tell. Like, I don't see a reason why we couldn't get that with Tom Holland and whoever is the next director. So hopeful, excited. And just to comment on that initial rumor about how there was a 9 movie idea for him, I could maybe see him have to, or maybe there are another 3, but those are like the Sony movies, like Venom, like whatever Venom crossover he's in. Maybe that counts as one, and he has 2 other ones lined up on top of the solo movies. I could maybe see that be where that rumor came from.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair, because we're going to see a Spider-Man Venom movie, like that is inevitable. I have a feeling that's probably Venom 3. Like, that's just what that movie's going to be, and Tom Holland's like the supporting star for that.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. We'll see some, like, oh god, whatever Morbius ends up being, plus Spider-Man and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm particularly excited for the MCU movies going forward.
For sure, yeah, and hopefully, maybe not soon, but we're gonna see him and Miles Morales together in the MCU. You know that, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's gonna be a good day. Well, why don't we move on to not Tom Holland's origins in the MCU, but his first solo movie in the MCU. It's time to continue Spider-Man interview with Spider-Man Homecoming. Jack, once again, what's your history with this movie, and I guess to a slightly other degree, Tom Holland in the MCU in general? Like, with the Civil War introduction and then the follow-up in Homecoming, what's your history with this Spider-Man in this movie?
Yeah, I guess we'll start at Civil War. I loved him in Civil War. Through the years, I think his direction in Civil War is much more jokey than he ends up being, and he has played a lot for like laughs. But I think he did like such a great job, and they did a really fantastic job of introducing him. I always love the Queens logo
Yeah.
and Alt J coming on, and he's walking through the apartment. Like, that whole scene is 10 out of 10. So I love that, and I was really excited for his solo movie going forward, and I was just excited that Spider-Man was, like everyone, I was excited that Spider-Man was in the MCU. And I came out of Homecoming when I saw it for the first time, like, really positive, and it really took, I think, a few years of sitting with that movie to really say, like, wow, this is one of the best Spider-Man movies. And I still have some issues with it being, like, maybe a little too light in terms of, like, it's not too focused on him growing, like, emotionally as a character in some ways. Some ways it is, but it's a lot more. It's a lot different than what we saw with Tobey Maguire and even Andrew Garfield to an extent. But yeah, this movie's a lot of fun. I like this movie a lot. I watched it for like the 1000th time with my girlfriend last night, as well as her roommate, and they liked it too. I feel like this is a very approachable Marvel movie because it's just like what my girlfriend said. She's like, I like the Spider-Man movies because the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies because they're just fun and like there's action. She doesn't love the action, but they're just mostly fun and easy to watch. So yeah, Homecoming's awesome. What about you?
Yeah, I was also a big fan of him in Civil War. He was my favorite part of Civil War for a very long time. That Queen's intro is like maybe one of my favorite moments in the MCU. And then Homecoming, right? Like the excitement for Homecoming was very high leading up to it. And I was super excited that they got Michael Keaton to be the Vulture because I thought that was super cool instead of redoing Goblin or retreading old water. So Homecoming felt very fresh and very exciting. And also going into it, I wanted it to feel classic. And I think in a lot of ways it does feel that way. There are elements that do feel different or newer comic book Spider-Man, like the emphasis on gadgets and all of that, which we'll get to. But yeah, I love Homecoming. I think it's a great Spider-Man movie. It's one of the best easily. And I love Tom Holland as Peter and Spider-Man. I think we talked about the pros and cons of Tobey and Andrew, but I do think that Tom Holland does strike that balance. Not perfect in terms of being a great Peter and a great Spider-Man, but I think he's the best at doing the balance between the two sides of the character. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Maybe jump with the gun, but he might be the best Spider-Man. Like,
he might
holistically.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't we get into the actual movie, Jack? How does it hold up for you? Because you mentioned this is like the millionth time you've seen it. I've also seen it many, many times. And I think there was a year where some network got it on TV and it was on all the time. But yeah, going back to it, I still really enjoy it. It's still really fun.
It's really fun, and it's still funny. Every time I watch this, and I watch this movie a lot, I still laugh at some of the jokes, and especially some of the stuff that is like kind of not that funny. Like it's I guess like more low key than like slapsticky. Like the chess bit always gets me. Of hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
good. What about you? Chess. Like all right. And yeah, I feel like this is a really good depiction of high school, or like maybe like a caricature of high school in the best possible way. Yeah, it's a funny movie that still hits every time I watch it, which I think is a sign of a good comedy. Because I wouldn't say this is a comedy, but it has even more than most MCU movies, it's very comedic, and it still holds up in that regard.
Yeah, like I think story-wise and the pace of it follows that comedy structure, like a high school comedy, you know? And some of the backdrop is some of those tropes of like, oh, there's a party, there's a dance, there's all these other things going on, there's gym class, but that's the background to what's going on with Spider-Man and Avenger in training Peter Parker, you know? So I really like that. I think it's very refreshing because We talked a lot about this with Toby. Those are a bunch of 30-year-olds, like, those aren't high school kids. No. And Sam Raimi's depiction of high school and relationships, it's very depressing, but like in a way I enjoy to a degree. Very melodramatic. Same with Andrew Garfield's. Like, it's very high, intense emotion, high schoolers. And you mentioned that this is sort of lighthearted, but I feel like it's kind of like how people that age actually interact, Like, I saw this when I was, a sophomore in college, I think. And I was like, that feels like what senior year for me was like. Like, it's a bunch of lighthearted, fun kids enjoying being friends and being young, So, like, I do think it's a good representation of that tone and humor, for sure.
Yeah, and it's not, like, over the top. Like, Flash is the bully, but he's not like, I'm going to pound you, Parker. And, like, Peter doesn't really sweat him all that much, which... Yeah, I feel like, especially for him being Spider-Man. But yeah, it is a really funny depiction of high school. I especially love the news broadcast that we get every once in a while.
It's so good, dude. It's, oh my God.
It's so funny. The bit that always gets me is Martin Starr, the teacher, talking about like DC and being like, just like can't lose a kid, not again. Like, that always makes me
like
laugh.
The zoom and like the hang on that shot. It's so, like, I know people take issue with John Watts as the director here, but I do think he really understands that like brand of humor that is kind of awkward that I feel like a lot of our generation really enjoys. So like I don't think I've seen that style of like maybe early YouTube irreverentness conveyed in a movie like this on this scale very often. So I always appreciate the newscast and just how simple and funny a lot of the humor is in this.
Yeah, no, totally.
In terms of the surrounding cast, new characters. We don't have Harry Osborn. We don't have Mary Jane Watson. We don't have Gwen Stacy. But we got Ned. We got a version of MJ. Liz Allen from Marvel's Avengers fame.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the supporting cast?
I have very high opinions of Ned. I think he's one of the best supporting characters in the MCU, period. Mm-hmm. It's funny, loyal. It's someone, like, you kind of just want to be around him the whole time. So I love Ned. I was talking about this with my girlfriend and her roommate last night, and they were kind of confused about the MJ bit. And I was thinking about it, and I kind of came to the conclusion of, like, I wish they just made her Mary Jane.
Me too.
And, like, I don't like the reveal. Like, oh, my friends call me MJ. Why go with Michelle to M? It's just a silly reveal at the end. Like, they should have just said, this is our Mary Jane. Because she is supposed to be the MJ character. Like, literally takes the acronym. So it's silly to me. Because I, as the MJ character, I like her a lot more than Kirsten Dunst. Mm-hmm. I think I still like Emma Stone, and they're two different characters, so it's hard to compare. But I think Zendaya brings something very different than we've seen in the supporting character for a woman that we've seen in the Spider-Man movies. So I like her a lot, and I kind of just wish they made her Mary Jane.
I wholeheartedly agree. I don't understand why I don't think it was to avoid like toxic fans. I think they just wanted that moment to be a reveal in a weird way. It was like, okay, sure. Because I mean, like Tom Holland's never gonna, you imagine, have a long-standing thing in these movies with a Mary Jane Watson if we already have an MJ, right? Like, she's Mary Jane. She's not like, I understand she's what, Michelle Jones is her name.
Yes, I think so.
Like, yeah, it's a weird choice. I think they're just kind of gonna brush that under the rug moving forward. Because they don't call her Michelle, I don't think, at all in Far From Home.
No.
And just her positioning in her role and her relationship with Peter and his life moving forward, it's the same as Mary Jane. So like, yeah, I bet that was just for Homecoming, and for all intents and purposes, she is Mary Jane Watson, you know.
I straight up think it's not a good decision.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's really weird, and it's not that big a deal, but it's very noticeable. Like, especially on rewatches, it's like they should have just gone with Mary Jane.
Yeah, I don't get it, but I mean, at the same time, you will have people that say, and I haven't experienced a lot of Miles comics, but people say that Miles' best friend Genki is just, it's Ned. You know, like Ned is just Genki, but in live action. And from my experience with him in the game, I can kind of see it, but like, yeah, I mean, Homecoming, I think, had to give itself an identity that wasn't just like, oh, we're going classic Spider-Man. It had to feel new in a way, because we got classic Spider-Man in a lot of ways twice already. And I think a way, or the avenue they chose to do it, was through Iron Man and through the supporting cast. And when it comes to Ned, I think that was a good choice. MJ's character, I think that was a good choice. But yeah, the name thing is weird, for sure.
Yeah, very bizarre.
Let's talk about Iron Man, because every time I come back to this, I am stunned that people call him Iron Boy Jr. because, like, Iron Man's in this movie for like 5 minutes, maybe.
It's however long they could get RDJ.
Yeah, like his presence is felt for sure.
Yes,
but like he's not teaching Peter anything. He's not directing him where to go. Like, Peter still acts on his own. He still messes up on his own. He just gets reprimanded by Tony, you know? So
yeah, I think it's like less of a problem for me nowadays, but I like the past 2 Tom Holland movies were him definitely dealing with his relationship to Iron Man. Like, in this movie in particular, like, he is doing most of the things in this movie to sort of like impress Tony Stark, and like it's always about like what you said, it is pretty much like the looming presence of Tony Stark rather than him being there like in his daily life. Like, he's very much trying to do this work to move up to the next level, and like at the beginning of the movie is him trying to be an Avenger. Obviously at the end, like, he refuses that, but yeah, I think, like, I'm not really opposed to, like, all the tech that Spider-Man gets in this. I know that's a big problem for people in terms of, like, Iron Man's presence in this, but it's just this take on Spider-Man. He's very much connected to the greater MCU, and in this case, it's Iron Man. And I hope with a new trilogy, it is more Peter being on his own, similar to the Garfield movies and the Maguire movies.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the reason why it's not a problem for me is because at the time this was so new. Like, we never saw Spider-Man interact with other superheroes. And he is very young. So the idea that he is looking up to somebody who he grew up with being a hero and being able to interact with that person, like, for a Spider-Man movie, like, for a singular movie, I think that's okay, you know? Like, it's not like every single Spider-Man project or appearance is like he's at Iron Man's beck and call. He's paired up with him a lot because they have that friendship, but like, in terms of this movie, like, that being offensive to it, I don't think that hurts it at all. The only thing that I don't love, especially now, I liked it at the time, Karen, I think, is fine. I'm glad she's gone, and we never brought it up again, but, like, she's fine for what she does in the movie, you know?
Yeah, I guess I never really had too big of an issue with her. I think that's the point in the movie where a lot of people get upset because, like, he gets a very big upgrade at that point. I like the comedic bits that he plays with her. I think that's fun. But yeah, she that presence really wasn't that big of an issue for me, and it's still kind of it doesn't really bother me. But yeah, I agree. It's nice that she's kind of not she's not like his Friday or anything anymore.
Yeah, and like I really loved it at the time. I still like the jokes and banter they have, but like just the idea that was a direction they were gonna go. I'm glad they were like, okay, maybe not, because
no, you're right.
I think as a method to allow Tom Holland to comic book style internal monologue on screen, it works, and I like that. But that for me, like giving him an AI, it's like you don't need to give him an AI, like that's fine. I'm fine with all the gadgets and everything else, and I am, like I said, fine with Karen. It's just it's a bit that I don't look forward to when I'm watching this movie on a rewatch, I guess.
No, that's fair.
What else? We should talk about Vulture.
Yeah, Vulture is awesome. Like what you said earlier, getting Michael Keaton for this role is perfect. I love that he just plays winged creatures in all of his superhero movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, he brings such like a unique presence in terms of like the villains of the MCU in this movie. Like he's just a dude, straight up just a dude. And we don't really, even when we see that with someone like, I don't know, like even like Obadiah Stane, like he's just a dude, but his arc is kind of not good. Mm-hmm. And it's very like kind of cliche in a way, but this is someone like you can kind of see being like a regular construction worker and then having his whole sort of business upended and being like, well, I have this technology, so might as well use it. And it's like almost that relatability in a way that makes him so endearing, and his personality is just fun. I love like the Hey Pedro bits, and eventually when Peter meets him, like you see what he's like around his family, and it's like, oh, this is just a normal, funny dude. Like you could see this being like one of your uncles when you go over to a party and he's just like kind of joking and messing around with you. He's just a human being that you understand through his character, and I think that is in large part to Michael Keaton's acting ability.
Is he really a villain? Because all he said is eat the rich, redistribute the wealth. That's
yeah. Like that's the best part of him, and like other villains like Killmonger, where it's like, damn, you kind of have a point.
Yeah, like obviously you're committing crimes, so like
sure.
The super cops, that's what they do. But like I really, really, obviously the scene in the car is incredible, but like I really love the scene shortly after that where Peter goes to the warehouse and he shows up, and Vulture's just like at his desk talking to Peter in the warehouse, and he's like talking about how they're the same in a lot of ways, which I like. And I think the fact that Spider-Man Peter Parker is that like supposed to be working class hero, and he's so not infatuated, but he looks up to Tony Stark, the billionaire, so much in this movie. I think maybe people would see it as contradictory, but to me, I think that's just like, yeah, he's a kid. He doesn't understand how the greater world works because he's a kid in high school that thinks Iron Man is cool, but he doesn't think about bills. He doesn't think about how Tony Stark could be paying his bills for him. He's looking at his future self with Keaton in that scene, and I do like that a lot.
No, he definitely nails the role, and I'm very glad that they, like what you were mentioning earlier, they opted to go with a villain we haven't seen yet for Spider-Man. Like Vulture was on the chopping block for I think Spider-Man 3, and then Spider-Man 4 was planned to use Vulture, and then obviously they didn't get around to it. So great to see them actually use the character. And I'm not super familiar with the comics, but I know this is a somewhat of a deviation. I think he was like, he had cancer and like his suit was keeping him alive or something like that. And this is obviously very different and more, I guess, more realistic in the MCU, the context of the MCU. But yeah, I thought it was such a great decision to include his character and have his arc progress the way it did.
Yeah, we had to get 2 Spider-Man movies in the MCU where it's brand new villains we've never seen before, because the third one is going to be every villain we've seen before.
True.
But no, I do really like Vulture. I think to this day he's still top 3 MCU villains for me. I think he's really, really great. Like, I look at him up there with Killmonger and Thanos, and before the two of them, he was my number 1 before those movies came out.
100%.
So, that car scene, that twist. Talk about theater moments. That was a memory I have.
That's the one where I was telling them last night. I was like, in theaters, everyone was astounded.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like twists in the MCU aren't very present unless like we're talking about like end credit scenes where it's like, oh, they're introducing this character, like Thanos and Avengers, the first movie. But yeah, that was a genuinely good twist where I don't think anyone really expected that. In that situation, like you would think, if like it would be like a Green Goblin situation where Vulture would have Liz and Peter would have to like save her or whatever, like very generic. But in this, it's like, no, the villain is protecting the love interest and because that's her father, and it was such an amazing twist, and like it still kind of hits, obviously, but like it still kind of hits when Peter gets to the door and like gets through that whole process, and it's so good.
The way it's presented, I think, is as far as the MCU goes, I think kind of masterful too, because like you have that build up, this is pretty much immediately after Peter gets shot down from being Spider-Man, and you have him just shifting, being like, okay, I'm going to be a high school kid, homecoming, we're going to deal with all this. There's the music playing, you go up to the door, and I remember in the theater, like, there were gasps. I was definitely shocked, and I think cutting the music there, like, it's just dead silent. You just see Tom Holland's acting there, and you don't know, like, him and as an audience, we're like, does Vulture know? Like, is he holding them hostage? And then the mom walks in, and you're like, fuck. This did not go the way we thought it was going to go. I thought it was handled really well.
It was so good. My thought was, like what you're saying, I thought in the theater, I was like, oh, he has them hostage. And it's like, oh, no, this is a family, and Peter has to deal with that. It is so genius. And, like, they really... Because, like, you only get the... you get him talking about his family, but in movies like this, it's like, it's whatever, generic sort of motivation. And then, like, you hear him talk about his kid, like, at the very beginning of the movie, so you sort of, like, kind of forget about that. It kind of blends into the background. But then, like, when you get the stakes of, oh, this is, like, Liz, and, like, you sort of understand those motivations. It's so good.
Did you ever pick up or see pointed out that there is one moment that's, like, foreshadowing, like, pretty... Not obviously, but like they make a direct line in dialogue that is like, oh, if you're paying attention and tracking everything, it's him.
It's at the school where the two henchmen say, like, could you imagine what the boss would think if we were here? Is that what you're talking about?
No, there's another one that's a bit more direct. So when there's the party scene, and Liz is greeting them, and then you hear something shatter, and then she's like, guys, and she like leaves the room to go take care of whatever that was. A little bit after that, when it cuts to Vulture's headquarters, the Tinkerer, I think, is like, oh, your wife called something about a busted tail light or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
So that was from the party.
That's cool. I never picked up on that.
Yeah. So that car scene, though, very good too.
Oh yeah.
Any other things to talk about with Homecoming before we give it a ranking and everything?
I guess, like, overall thoughts. I absolutely adore this movie. I think it is one of the better Spider-Man movies. I'm missing the weight. I think it's very. It has a lot of heart to it, but I don't think it has that much weight to it in terms of, like, emotional weight. The scene that always gets me is him lifting the debris over him. Like, that always makes me emotional. That's kind of the extent that we get in this movie, compared to like the Tobey Maguire movies and even the Andrew Garfield movies. So still missing that from Spider-Man, but this is a really fun and just all around enjoyable movie. So yeah, love this movie.
Yeah. Where do you rank it in your Spider-Man rankings?
Okay. So I gave this a 4.5 on Letterboxd. I think this was sitting at a 4 for me for a while, and then I bumped it up to a 4.5 like a couple years ago. But this is my ranking right now. So number 10 is Spider-Man 3. Number 9 is Venom. 8 is Venom Let There Be Carnage. 7 is Amazing Spider-Man 2. 6 is Amazing Spider-Man. 5 is Spider-Man. 4 is... Oh, wait, sorry. My Apple Notes does this. 3 is Spider-Man Homecoming. 2 is Spider-Man 2. And 1 is Into the Spider-Verse. For some reason, it like skips over a number anytime I make a new list. So, yeah, it is number 3 below Spider-Man 2 and Into the Spider-Verse.
So, for me, it is also number 3, Spider-Man Homecoming. I think I also gave it 4.5, or maybe 4, I forget. But it is wedged between number 4, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1, and number 2, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So,
nice.
Yeah. For my full ranking, because I think we differ only at the top 2, but number 9 is Spider-Man 3, 8 is Venom, 7 is Venom 2, 6 is Amazing Spider-Man 2, 5 is Amazing Spider-Man, 4 is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, 3 is Homecoming, 2 is Spider-Verse, and 1 is Spider-Man 2. So,
very cool. So what does that mean for our group ranking?
Our group ranking, I think it means it's still at number 3, because the only difference of our group ranking is that I think Spider-Verse is number 1.
I gotta be honest, I expected a very different list from us as a group ranking.
What did you expect to be super different? Like, what is there a specific movie you thought was going to be majorly different?
I thought you were less of a Sam Raimi guy and more of a Andrew Garfield, Mark Webb guy. So I thought those would be flipped. I thought Spider-Man 2 and even Spider-Man 1 would be lower on the list.
Sure. I mean, I think I still am an Andrew Garfield and Mark Webb guy. I can just acknowledge that Spider-Man 2 is the best Spider-Man movie, and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1, I was surprised how nostalgic I was watching it, even though I might like Amazing Spider-Man more, I think, as a movie and a performance. But the nostalgia is strong with that first one, so
yeah,
carries it a lot. But
that's fair.
In terms of Spider-Man ranking for our notes app, we got Andrew at 1, Toby at 2. Where do you want to put Tom Holland?
Number 1, for sure.
So are we taking the whole package here or just Spider-Man?
I think he is definitely the best Spider-Man. I was like, I go back to the bank scene where like it's quips galore there and like everything kind of hits. Like talking to the fake Avengers. That's fun. And even as Peter, like I prefer hanging out with this Peter Parker as a viewer than I do with certainly Tobey Maguire. Like, I don't want to be around that guy. He's a fucking creep. And Andrew Garfield for the first movie I didn't super like, and I thought he was ironed out for Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I think like overall Tom Holland is kind of the best Spider-Man.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think he strikes the balance the best. I think I still prefer the Spider-Man moments in Amazing Spider-Man 2 the most out of everything. Like, pure Spidey. I go to that one for what I want out of Spider-Man. But, yeah, I think, like you mentioned, all your points about Tom Holland hit. Also, that montage of him just being the neighborhood Spider-Man, didn't bring that up. Love that.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So, yeah, Tom Holland is the best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So, when it comes to the villain ranking, however, from bottom to top, we got Venom, Riot, New Goblin, Lizard, Carnage, Sandman, Goblin, Doc Ock.
We kind of missed out on the Andrew Garfield ones, I think.
Oh, we did, yeah. I mean, Lizard's on here.
Okay. We missed out on Electro and...
Rhino, I would like to put above, at least above Franco, New Goblin.
Yeah, sure.
Electro.
He's pretty low.
How low? How low do you think?
What's at the very bottom?
Very bottom is Eric Foreman Venom.
Okay, he's above Eric Foreman Venom.
Then we got Riot. That was Venom 1.
I would say above Riot.
Okay. Below New Goblin.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, Harry does have some moments, you know?
Yeah.
So Electro's there. And then Dane DeHaan Goblin.
So I would start at least above Harry Goblin.
Fair. Yeah, you're right.
And then what's above?
Above him is Rhino.
Okay, he's above Rhino.
Above that is Lizard.
I would put him above... Yeah, I'd put him above Lizard.
The thing is...
I like Dane DeHaan's character.
No, you're right, because I don't love Goblin, but his Harry is carrying him on this list, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So what's above... Okay, so he's above Lizard. What's above that?
Above that is Carnage, which I don't know if I can do.
Yeah. What's above Carnage?
Sandman.
All right.
He's not better than Sandman.
No. That's fine. That's fine. Below Carnage.
Below Carnage? Okay. Because the thing is, when Harry in TASM 2 is a villain, kind of sucks, right? But, like...
Yeah.
At least Carnage is funny at times. They're just, like, weird. You know, it's like the whole movie's committing to that. It's not this, like, oh, compelling character, and then, what are you doing? Why are you green? You know?
Yeah.
For Vulture, though, where does Vulture fit in here?
So, number 1 right now is...
Octavius.
I think he's number 1. I think Vulture's number 1.
Controversial take, but you're right, Jack.
like the Raimi universe kind of exists in like a cartoon existence.
Yes.
You know, it's not like very realistic. And this is just much more set in stone, as in like this could obviously suspend your disbelief, but this could exist in our universe, but specifically the Vulture could exist in, like, people are like him, and I feel like he is very grounded, and I feel like as the audience you're much more able to connect with him than you are with any of the other villains we've had so far. So yeah, I think Vulture's number 1.
Like, I think Doc Ock is tragic, and because he is in that sort of... It feels like those movies are plays, kind of, or like going for like this weird Shakespeare undertone with a lot of like the way people talk to each other. I feel like that makes Doc Ock feel a bit more grand, but I do think Vulture as a realized character is more interesting and less, not cartoonish, but like he has actual motivations, you know, that are believable. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think he, after talking about it and thinking about it, I think he's kind of the clear number 1.
Well, I'm glad we agree. I'm excited to re-rank all of these villains after we see them in No Way Home.
Oh, God.
Oh, man. Well, yeah, there is Homecoming. So we have one last major topic to discuss. I don't know how much you have to say on it, because
we could do a very quick Hawkeye run through.
Hawkeye is here. It's the recent MCU show. We're halfway through it, believe it or not. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's wild.
3 episodes deep. As spoiler-free or spoiler-filled as you'd like to discuss, Jack, what do you think of Hawkeye so far? How is it shaping up for you with the other MCU shows this year? Let's hear it.
It's kind of a bit of a roller coaster for me. I think the first 2 episodes coming out of them, I was kind of lukewarm on the series. I like obviously the interactions between Kate and Clint are amazing. I love Clint's family. But didn't, and I still don't like Kate's interaction, or I don't like Kate's family plot. I think that's very boring, and if they're gonna go like two different directions with that, and they're both very obvious, and I think it's like I don't like being around those characters. I don't like Jack's character, and I don't like her mom's character. But it was really episode 3 that sort of turned it around for me. I think episode 3 is some of the tightest, like 40 minutes or however long it was we've had in the MCU, and it does a lot, where it goes over Echo's character at the beginning, and then it has some amazing action sequences. So yeah, it's kind of been weird. I didn't love the first 2 episodes, but I adored the 3rd episode, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. How about you?
I'm in a similar spot where I think the first batch, I really enjoyed my time, but that was just because Kate Bishop is here, you know? And I'm a big fan of Kate, and I think Haley Steinfeld is doing a great job as Kate and carrying over the things I really like about her portrayal in Avengers, as well as the, read I had of her in reading the comic run a few years ago at this point. So Kate, this is, as far as I'm concerned, the Kate Bishop show. So there was that element that maybe made me enjoy the first 2 a little bit more than you did. And I agree episode 3 is a big step up. And I'm hoping that momentum is carried through with the last few episodes, because I think we're in a really interesting and good spot at the moment. But yeah, the question I have for you, because I'm not too sure where you land on this. Historically, Jeremy Renner, Clint Barton, how do you feel about him in the MCU, and how do you feel about him now?
I never had a problem with him as a character. He got shafted, obviously, like with he like didn't have his own solo movie and things like that. But I always liked hanging out with Clint, and I liked the Ronin subplot of Endgame. I like in a way that we're dealing with it, but it's kind of odd, I guess, with the whole suit situation. Like, literally, my girlfriend and I were looking at each other and we're like, why don't they just burn the suit, like, for the first episode? But yeah, no, I really liked Clint, and I think, especially with episode 3, I like the direction they're going with his character, especially in terms of his deafness. So yeah, in this show, I think they're giving him his due, which is deserved.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I never had a problem with Clint. I actually enjoyed him in, like, his 4 lines in Thor. I like Avengers 1, when he actually gets to be a member of the team. I think he's a solid member, even though he doesn't have much to do. Age of Ultron, I think he's like maybe the highlight of the movie, and the reason I enjoy going back to Age of Ultron, especially now. And I really like him in Civil War. Like the comedy he has, the relationship he has with Wanda, I really like. I think for me, the only thing that I don't like about Clint is the direction they went with him in Endgame, because it just did feel kind of weird, I think, because we didn't see him for a while in the MCU between Civil War and Endgame, and then there's just that pretty drastic jump, which I think they do justify, but like, I don't know, it just felt like a very serious turn for a character that historically has been kind of comedic, and in the comics for sure is supposed to be a wisecracker. Like, yeah, so seeing the direction they're taking with him here, dealing with the repercussions of Endgame, I think is fine, but seeing him sort of fill out Hawkeye the way I'm always like, Hawkeye's better in the comics, to my girlfriend Kayla, who does not like him in the movies. It's nice to see him fill in that role the way I see Hawkeye in the comics. Maybe not fully, but taking steps to that point, and I think the deafness is part of it for sure. So yeah, I think maybe not, they're not giving him his, or they are giving him his due, but I think it's more so that they're making Hawkeye Hawkeye instead of just the bow guy, you know?
No, true. And I like where we kind of find ourselves with these Disney Plus shows where we're getting more character growth than we really ever have with a lot of characters that are either like smaller characters or supporting characters or things like that, and we're like really getting into their psyche. And it's cool to see Clint like sort of dealing with his family and like really wanting to be with them, but being sucked back into this world that he wanted to retire from. I think that is really great to deal with, and I hope he just gets a nice send-off and gets to retire. That's my hope for his character.
I hope, because then if he does not get a nice send-off or to retire, then Natasha's sacrifice was for nothing. So
no, definitely.
He better retire.
I would be surprised if Clint doesn't walk away and just retire. Like that would, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, Captain America and Iron Man can't retire, so that's why one of them died and one of them aged.
Yeah.
But I feel like Clint is a character where everyone would be like, yeah, he just went off to live with his family, and everyone's okay with that. And if he wants to come back, he can, but he probably won't.
Yeah, and that's what happened after Age of Ultron. Like he retired, because that's his first thing he says when he shows up in Civil War is like, I went to retirement and everything goes to shit. So like, yeah, put him on ice. If Jeremy Renner wants to come back, if there's a story to tell down the line, go for it. But I think Haley Steinfeld being the new Hawkeye is going to be welcome, probably better, and I'm excited for that. But what do you think of Echo so far?
I like Echo. We only had that one episode to get into her character, but I really liked that sequence of her as a child and like growing up. And like it seemed like she's not going to be a villain for much longer, it seems. So obviously we have her show coming up. So I saw a lot of parallels, like I said earlier, to Daredevil. Just like similar, like she doesn't have one of her senses, so she has to just strengthen her other senses. She even like mentions to Clint like, hey, you'd be better off without that hearing aid because you'd just be stronger. And I thought that was interesting, and I like what we've seen with her so far in terms of her being like a relatable character, and I like her so far.
Are you on the train of that jacket and hand belonging to one Wilson Fisk?
Yeah, dude, and it's not even clever. Like,
no, it's not.
Why would they do that? Like, if you know, you really know, and it's very much not subtle. And did you see Vincent D'Onofrio's social media post recently?
Yeah.
For those that didn't, he took a selfie of him. I think it was at Disney during Christmas time. So like, duh. It's really like that was so silly to me. Like, they're gonna reveal him fully, I'm sure, at the end of the series. Why not just save it? Like, why literally point to the audience and be like, yep, that's him. Like, if you know this big dude, that's the guy. That's Kingpin. Like, it's very silly. I don't know why they did that. They should have kept it under wraps. I know a lot of people, like, already kind of knew or, like, were speculating that he would be in here, but just save it to the end. Like, it's really silly that they revealed it that way.
I think he will be fully revealed next week.
Ooh, wow.
I'm thinking that because I imagine they will want to have the Daredevil floodgate opened before Spider-Man, if other rumors from this year have some credibility to them.
Gotcha.
You know? Because, like, hypothetically, if we were to see the return of Charlie Cox in the MCU in a project that is maybe releasing sometime soon, why tease and hold off that carrot of Wilson Fisk in your show that's going on right now and be like, oh, the episode that comes out after this project maybe where Daredevil's back, it's like, oh, it's Yeah, it's Kingpin. Like, we all knew it was King. You know, like, it feels like a weird thing. I don't think it's a coincidence that these two projects are very close to each other. But, yeah, it's Kingpin.
Yeah, that's an interesting call because they did something very similar to during the Rise of Skywalker and the Mandalorian's first season, where in the episode right before Rise of Skywalker, they introduced like force healing through Grogu, and then obviously in Rise of Skywalker, Rey uses that ability. So like, if you're a Star Wars fan and you were watching along, like you kind of got that beforehand, so it was less of a new like intrusive ability, and like you kind of already got a sense for that. So yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah, like maybe it is a coincidence, but I'd be surprised. When are you doing a Daredevil rewatch? That's my next question.
Oh god, dude, I love Daredevil. Season 1 incredible. Season 2 is like, for the first half is pretty good. Second half is like bleh. And season 3 is amazing. So yeah, maybe. Dude, I've been having a weird rewatch situation. I restarted Game of Thrones. So
wow.
I can restart any show, and would love to rewatch Daredevil if given the appropriate avenue. If he returns, then yeah, I will prepare and rewatch Daredevil.
That's the thing, because like I never saw season 3. I fell off halfway through season 2 when it started to turn sour, because I was also in college and just busy. But yeah, dude, season 1 is incredible. I hear amazing things about season 3. I loved Jessica Jones and what I saw of Punisher. So like, I bet season 3 of Daredevil is as good as people say it is. Is it going to be canon? I don't know. But regardless, I would like to watch it, I think.
Yeah, I hope so, because it was canon at first, and it's very easy for them to just be like, yep, still canon. But who knows?
Yeah. Well, is there anything left unsaid about Hawkeye so far that you'd like to bring up before we wrap up?
Not really. I think this will sort of plateau again. Like once the storylines that I don't like will come back into the fray, I feel like I'm still not going to like them. So I'm sort of projecting this to be somewhere in the middle of my MCU ranking. It's very fun. I like the tone of it. It's very lighthearted, and I love having shows and projects that don't push the MCU forward in any real direction. Like, it's just existing in the MCU. So yeah, I enjoy that aspect of it, and it's a fun show. I don't think it's anything spectacular so far, at least. Episode 3 was great, but I think by the end, this will be a fun show to revisit every once in a while.
Yeah, I think you're right. I could see this maybe be in my Christmas rotation every season, maybe. Yeah, sure. If there's one episode that really stands out to me, maybe the finale has really big Christmas vibes. Maybe that, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So, well, that is a beefy recap of what's up with Marvel the last 2 weeks. As always, it is a pleasure, Jack. But until next week, where can everybody find you?
Yes, you can follow me on social media at Fascinated Jack. What about you, Christian?
You can find me on Twitter and TikTok at Chun2D2. YouTube.com/JoyClicks is where you can find the video version of Excelsior, some other videos, and potentially streams. We got Game Awards coming up. You can look forward to that. You can also find us on your favorite podcast service like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, whatever you use to listen to shows. Rating and reviewing on there always helps. If you can do it, it takes a quick second, and we appreciate it very much. And shout out, Spotify for Podcasters shows some data for just the Spotify pool on our end. Do you have a guess of what our most listened to episode was this year?
Oh my God! This year's been so long.
I know. It was an episode that came out within the last 6 months.
Quarter? Okay. I would say maybe War for Wakanda review.
You nailed it. The War for Wakanda episode was the number one.
Oh, cool. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's at least on Spotify.
Awesome.
I think most of our listener base is Apple Podcasts, but shout out regardless.
Wow, I was gonna insult Apple Podcasts, but I guess I won't.
No, we love Tim Apple and his podcast service.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they have their own like little Spotify Wrapped. I think I saw Kevin Diaz post that. I'm like, can't believe you're doing that. You're advertising that you listen to Apple Music. Okay.
Yeah, embarrassing, right?
It's very embarrassing. But thanks for listening.
Yes. If you want to support the shows further, though, patreon.com/joyclicks at the $1 and $5 tiers. $5, you'll get producer credit on every podcast we produce, like Aaron Easton and Charles Applin. But that is it. We will be back next week with another Hawkeye episode, Spider-Man Far From Home, and we'll be very, very close to No Way Home. You and I secured tickets for that. Feels good.
Yes. Yeah. We have an opening night viewing with our friend Omar. Very exciting. It feels like it's not that close, but it is very imminent.
Yeah, it's like 2 weeks, dude.
Yeah. So it's kind of wild. I'm trying to go as blackout as possible. I'm not watching like TV spots or anything. But at this point, what could be spoiled? What else could be spoiled?
Right. So that's a good note to leave off on. And until next week, Excelsior, it's pizza time.
Excelsior, it's pizza time.